Hi, everybody. This is Alicia Katz-Pollock at learn.royalwise.com, and today I am very excited to introduce you to a new feature that's being rolled out in QuickBooks Online. It's been rolled out for the last couple of weeks, but this is the first chance I've had to sit down and show it to you since we've been at Scaling New Heights and on the Intuit Roadshow, and so I'm really excited to show you this new feature. So what it is the Reclassify tool that has been available in QuickBooks Online for accountants. And it's a fast and easy way to take a look at a client's books and see where the transactions are, and if things have been miscategorized, easily in bulk move them from account to account. So if you are an accountant who has been making journal entries in order to change the financials, instead of doing it that way, I mean, the journal entries make sense to you, but they sure don't make sense to your business owners. And the end result is that they'll keep doing the same things wrong because they look at their books to see how they've been doing it. So Reclassify is a bookkeeper or accountant's best friend in order to true up the books for tax time. So let's go see how it works. Let me go ahead and share my screen with you. So where I am is I'm in one of my client's files, and then I go to the briefcase up here in the upper right-hand corner, and that takes me to Reclassified Transactions. Overall, the tool looks a lot like it did before, but there are some big enhancements to it. Two of the complaints that there were in the past is that the dates would change every time you edited a transaction. You would have to go back and reset the dates, and you don't have to reset the dates anymore. They are sticky. And the other one is that if you had a long list of transactions and there were too many for the screen, the top button that would select them all wouldn't work, wouldn't even be there, and you had to hand select or shorten your time frames. So those two major flaws have been vastly improved in the new system. The way it works is down in the left-hand column, you have your profit and loss accounts or your balance sheet accounts. Right now, I'm going to use my profit and loss accounts. Then you have the ability to change the basis for what accounts show, because on a cash-based P&L, you're not going to see some transactions, or let's put it this way, like on a balance sheet, if you're cash-based, you're not going to see your accounts receivable, but if you are accrual based, they'll be there. So, personally, I just leave it on accrual. I don't see any reason to filter out just for cash based, because you're going to see what you're going to see. Now, what happens in this layout is you click on the different categories and you can see what transactions are in those groups. And then you can click on the transaction that you want to move. Now, I'm going to show you all that in a minute, but before I do, I want to show you a couple other things that you can change about this interface. Turn your attention over to the baby gear over on the right. It's officially called the grid gear, but I always call it the baby gear. And when I click on that, the very first thing that I like to do is change the display density to compact so that I can see more on the screen all at one time. You can turn on and off different columns. So if you don't need document number, for example, you can turn that off and save yourself some real estate. I'm going to go ahead and leave that on, though. You also have the ability to change the number of rows that show on a page. And this is another big, wonderful change. I love being able to see 300 all at one shot. Now, this one that I'm on doesn't have 300, but you get the idea. There's also the ability to hide disabled lines, and what that does is when you're doing a reclassify, there are some things that reclassify cannot be used for. So instead of seeing them and trying to click on them, it doesn't even put them up there. And I'll show you some ways around that in a few minutes. So let's go ahead and do some reclassification. I'm going to head down to my uncategorized expense, which is always the first place that I look for these things. Now, the date range probably defaulted to just this year, but I want to remind you that there are some fabulous date shortcuts that you can use. So if I do T, it takes me to today. This is generally what you would see. Or if I type the letter M, it would take me to the beginning of the month, this being June. So there's my June 1st. And if I want to go back to the beginning of the year, if I type the letter Y, it will change the calendar to January 1st. And so I can click on January 1st and change that to Y. Now, if I'm going to do a reclassification, a lot of the time I will go back over time through past years. And even though taxes have been submitted, there's the argument for, and a lot of you aren't going to agree with me with this, but there's the argument for cleaning up transactions that were wrong in the past. They were still expenses in the past taxes, but maybe they weren't necessarily in the right place. And myself, I want to be able to analyze my reports year over year to see the growth and see the trending in the business. And so as long as it's not going to change the total financials or change the taxable income and deductions, I will sometimes move things from category to category in the past. So I generally find it helpful to go back a year or so when I'm doing these tasks. Once you set the dates, though, what's nice is, as I mentioned before, the dates are not going to change. Now here I am in unclassified transactions. So down here at the bottom, uncategorized transactions. And now that I've changed the date, wow, I can see there's a whole lot of uncategorized transactions. Okay, so I'm on uncategorized transactions. I can see them all, and this one was for MailChimp. So if I click on it, I can then click on Reclassify and change that to my advertising and promotions. So that would be marketing. And I can also change the class here as well. That's an overhead expense. So I'll go ahead and move that one to advertising and promotion and overhead. And then I'll apply. Let's look at some ways of doing this even bigger and better. I'm going to head over to my office supplies. And in my office supplies, I have loads and loads of transactions over time. And one thing that I always like to do when I am working in Reclassify is, it's second nature to put them all in date order. But when they're in date order, they're typically going to be all mixed together. What I like to do myself is click on the vendor name or the customer name and group them by that column. Now everything is all together, and I can look at all of the big warehouse, and I can look at all of iTunes, and I can look at all of Office Mart, and then make sure that things are in the right places. When I want to move several all at once, I could, for example, iTunes. The idea with iTunes is the owner thinks that they are listening to music in the office, but if this is really just them on their phone, I can go ahead and reclassify all of these transactions and make them owner draw. So let me go ahead and move all of those, and I'll click on the reclassify button and change that account to owner draw and make sure it has a classification of overhead. Now, sometimes you might have an expense that has been categorized in a bunch of different places depending on what mood you're in at the time. So, for example, another tool that I can now use is I can now filter all of this by one vendor name. So if I look for Adobe, for example, now notice that it still says office supplies right here. So I'm going to clear that filter, and I'm going to filter for Adobe, and I'll find all of my Adobe transactions. And I can see here under account that my Adobe transactions have actually been put into 3 different accounts. For some reason, there's a computer supplies and equipment and computer and office equipment. If I look in my profit and loss, I can see that my computer supplies / equipment is actually my expense account. The one with the and is probably a fixed asset account. And then a whole number of them are under office supplies. So I need to reclassify most of these. I'm going to check them all off, and the ones that are in this account are actually correct, so I'll leave those 2 alone. But now I'll go in and reclassify all the rest of them from no matter where they wound up by accident. I will put them now in computer supplies and equipment, with the slash mark. And I'll also make sure while I'm at it that they're overhead expenses. So you can see how handy it is to be able to bulk classify like that. Now, the addition of the filters are super handy so that you can look for things in all different ways. You can filter by type and find just certain, maybe you want to work with your journal entries. You also can find everything that has not been classified. So I'm going to click on class and none and find transactions. And now I can find everything in here that doesn't have a class assigned at all. Some of these are overhead expenses. Others of these need to go to specific classes. So I can find them in here, and let's say that I want to find everything from First National Bank of Bayshore, that all of these go to one of my jobs. So I'll pull up just the unclassified transactions from First National, and the ones that are bank charges, I will go in and make overhead. Okay. And so I will go ahead and reclassify those to overhead. And so those will now disappear off of my list because my list is things that have none. And let's go find some of these. Everything that's in payroll liabilities are the ones that I want to move to job costing. Now this is most of this page right here. It's going to be easiest for me to turn on the check mark for all of these and just take off the ones that I don't need in order to leave just the ones that I do. So bear with me while I check these off and move them where they belong. It would be nice if there was the shift click trick like you can do on the bank feed. But in any case, now I will reclassify these, and the jobs that we were working on at the time were all new construction. So I'll go ahead and change those to new construction, and boom, there they go off of the list. And then the last ones are my interest, and so I will reclassify those to overhead. So there you go. So those are the different ways that you can use the Reclassify tool. Now there are some limitations to this. For example, when you are doing construction, let's go ahead and clear out all of these filters. So all clients, all classes, find transactions, and I am going to limit this one to just this year because otherwise there would be too much stuff. Let's take a look at my service fee income. Now, take a look at something that's wrong here. When my service fee income should really just be some of my services, and if I look on this list, I see that concrete and labor is on this list. Now, it's not going to let me reclassify the concrete and labor, and this is how you know. If I click on reclassify and I say, oh, those are really construction income, when I try and apply it, I get a message that says we can't apply those changes. One or more of those changes cannot be reclassified. It may be that you tried to change the account on certain transactions, which is not allowed. The English interpretation of that is that these transactions are product and service based. If I go ahead and click on one, I can see here that it was a service that they had gotten. And so the problem here is not that the category was categorized wrong, but the product was set up incorrectly. And so I will open up products and services in another tab. I like to leave this here. So in order to do that, I'll go to sales and I'll right click on products and services and open it in a new tab. And when I'm in my products and services list, I go look for concrete labor and I edit it. And sure enough, it's in the wrong account. It's in service and fee income, and it really should be in construction income. I'll make that change. And notice what I get here. I get this box that says also update this account in historical transactions. So yes, I want to do that in the past because they were all wrong. It's still income, so that doesn't change my tax liabilities. So I'll go ahead and I'll fix that, and I'll save and close. And so now that's been edited, and when I go back to reclassify and refresh my screen, and I'm looking back to my service fee income. I'll go back and in my years again, so we can see that same date range and find the transactions, and lo and behold, those now are gone. So sometimes income categories are product-based issues. So there's the overview of the new Reclassify screen. If you have any feedback about it, or there's more things that you would like to see it do, don't forget to turn to the feedback in the upper right-hand corner and send them a message about compliments with what you like and new features that you would like to see it also do. I myself would love to be able to add customer names to these. So these right here that don't have anything written on them, I want to be able to assign a vendor name. I also, in addition to reclassifying the class, I would love to be able to add locations to these as well. So that's my 2 cents. That's my feedback. So thanks for watching my tour today. This is Alicia Pollock at learn.royalwise.com with Look What I Found, Reclassify.